So as you can see, we're right now kind of in that January, February, March zone in the first few months there. And working on where do we go next, we do this public engagement. We have a technical advisory committee made up of leadership of local transportation DOT representatives, county highway superintendents, elected officials that work as our technical advisory that we bounce things off. We take the data we get from the public, we look at it, we synthesize it, and then we go back to them and saying, okay, here's what we're seeing, and they're telling us also here's what the data says. You kind of try to weave those together. Where does your data, where does your public content match? Eventually, you get into forecasting, you get into developing goals, strategies. We have some draft goals that are on the board in the back of what we think they are, but that's where we're taking, we have Doug sitting by the big notepad, we also have markers around. If there's things you don't like, let us know, write them down, make the note down, like, you know, goal 2 sounds wonderful, but it'll never happen. Good, we need to know that. Nothing's wrong to be said in this room, it's all good content for us to know. As we work through that, going through the summer, mid to late summer, we'll end the public engagement process. The draft plan is slated to be released around October for public review. We'll likely have another meeting at that point in time. And that is truly, it's out for draft review. It also goes to the committees at that time for their review. Ultimately, we work on taking it to our policy committee for adoption in early December. We got a few steps to get through before then, but that's the general time frame, with multiple checkpoints back to the public to say, this is what we heard, this is how we heard it, did we get it right, does it make sense? And we ultimately, the big piece which I'll talk about in the next slide, we also use this to develop a list of potential projects that are coming here. So maybe it is extending the trail system, maybe it's that, you know, we find out we really, one of the things to focus on is connecting all the trail segments that are less than 2 miles in length so that we start closing the gaps in that trail. We put those projects in there because then when the federal government releases funds and funding applications, when they say, is it part of a plan? Did you take it through a public process? We go, yep, it's in the long range plan, it's item number this, and that helps us to score better to bring the grant money into the area to get the funding. So this is all part of how do we get the funding here? How do we get it spent on these 2 counties? We do this process every 5 years. So great. Talking the good points from the last long-range plan. What did we complete? This is big because the planning department in Hawks stays kind of out of the limelight, doesn't like to advertise a lot of what it is doing behind the scenes. We built an electric vehicle charging station plan. That was the first one, a plan because that was what came out. We knew this EV infrastructure was going to be built out. Took a look at the 2 counties and said, hey, where should they go logically? Where are we seeing those gaps in the system that if somebody came into Utica on exit 31 and wanted to go to Old Forge, can they make it further? We then built out the dashboard, which you can see the little graphic of here. So it shows you in Oneida County where those charger stations are. It also has a portal, a one-way portal that you can submit them. So if you know somebody built one, and we might not always see it through because they don't always come through like planning board or zoning board, and you find one, you can submit there one way, let us know, we'll go out, make sure it's there, GPS it, and get it up there. On top of that, the county, Oneida County, was just awarded based on using the information here in the charging station plan, a CFI, which is a Clean Fueling Infrastructure Grant, direct federal grant to Oneida County to install 41 charging stations on publicly owned properties in the county. It should be noted that we were one of 3 awardees in New York State. The other 2 were New York State DOT and New York City DOT. So when you look at it, what we're doing is allowing us to compete on that level and bring the money here, because if it's not being spent here, it's being spent somewhere else, and I just as soon as get as much here as we possibly can.
What level of charger is that? Is that 2?
2s, I believe 2s, yes. Roadway infrastructure projects. DOT, we worked with DOT, the North Genesee Street bicycle and pedestrian connections, upgrading those where they were able to put in the widened, more pathway with the signage, with the divided walkway, and that leads into that safety project that went from the auditorium down around on Broad Street with the new roundabout in there, and also the bridge new replacements that we've supported throughout the Bridge New York program. That helps get the monies to the local communities But the fact that we can reference that bridge infrastructure replacements were part of an overall thing that we saw as a need for the two counties strengthens their ability to go apply as an individual municipality. Because that's the beauty. Anything that the Transportation Council does for the two counties, any local municipality can pick up those pieces and go, hey, this is an issue in my municipality, and the Transportation Council talked about it here, so yes, it was included in a plan. So all our documents are usable by our membership, which is a very big supportive piece to help the locals get money funded directly to them. The Safety Action Plan, which is the next piece, the other piece we're launching the public engagement portion tonight, and Steve will go into that. That's about a $500,000 project to do a safety baseline analysis of the local road system. New York State has a highway strategic safety plan for the state road system. This plan is for the local system, county, town, village, city, everything under the state network, to do that same umbrella safety analysis. Where's all the issues? What's the data say? And then Steve will get into the Safe Streets Reporter rebuilt, the other ways where we're talking to the public to find out where's the information that the data doesn't tell us? Where are the safety issues? It builds into strategies. That money is direct federal government to Oneida and Herkimer County for that. So that's a $500,000 straight to us. And the good part is anything in there implementation-wise, you then can get straight federal funding. You can apply and get funded to implement. And the same thing, any municipality in the two counties can apply. So these are bigger things. Another big one that came out of the previous long-range plan, Exit 31, which you'll hear more about. We'll launch that one publicly in June. Exit 31, we have secured about $800,000 to study the feasibility of redesigning that. What could the future of 31 be? How can 31 better be configured to support our economic development, access to the local communities, and reduce the safety issues we have there? We're working with DOT and Federal Highways and the Thruway Authority on it, so it's a very large project. More to come in June on that. And then the extension of the off-road trail network. We have every 2 years, DOT puts out an application solicitation for the Transportation Alternatives Program. Did about $2.5 million maybe for the 6 counties Region 2 serves. We know we have more than $6 million in need just in our 2 counties. So but we've been very successful. City of Rome has built out the Mohawk River Trail using this. Some of our smaller communities have built in pieces. So that's always something we want to look at supporting too, and we have through the past one. So like I said, I'm not great at always promoting on what we've done, but it is really critical at this point because this long-range plan feeds a lot of this as we build into things and can move forward. So getting into a little bit of detail to give you a little overview of what those boards say in the back. How's the region changing? So right now we're kind of projecting, perfect, I got a little pointer, it's tiny, but the population in 2023, just about 208,000. We're showing 2045 a slight decrease to 268. Now, statistically speaking, that's pretty much flatlining it. It's not a change. Why is this way? We went back 20 years of population data. Historically trending, this is where it's going. We're hoping it pops up. We're hoping we're too conservative and the numbers are actually better than we want. But in transportation planning, you sometimes plan on that conservative method because especially too when you're looking at, we don't need to justify more roadway capacity. We have the capacity. We need to justify how do we improve the network? How do we fix the problems within the existing network? Not that we need to build that new 5-lane interstate. And same thing with households. Now households, statistically speaking, you can kind of take it's 118 to 114. Same things, almost flatlining. Households is a little more interesting. Why does it matter for transportation? Because when you're looking at things, if you have a household, in theory, you're generating traffic from that household. You're having 1 or 2 cars there, or you're having multi-generational households. What we're kind of tracking is that household number, is it going to jump up or not? And we think this is possibly because of the housing issues and people living more multi-generational or having roommates, that maybe a household isn't just one person anymore because a single person isn't renting that apartment, or they're buying a house but they're buying it so their in-laws can live with them. So we think it's a little bit of the changing socio-demographics, the housing. And again, in 5 years we look at this again and we go, were we on or were we not? And that's that's projection and modeling and forecasting. You take a best guess from historical trends and where things might be going, but as you're all probably aware, there's many moving parts in our world and economy right now. So we may be back in 5 years going, great, we were conservative, or we might be going, you know what, we were totally off, it's going wonderful. I have no idea. Employment projections, the same thing, about flatlining. Now we have a lot of economic development going on, so the hope is we're wrong. We hope we maybe, you know, pop it up by 20,000 jobs in 5 years. That would be amazing. It's yet to be foreseen though, because there's a lot of things in the pipeline right now that are coming that will, or they're in progress, or they're slated to have. So this next 5 years, we're looking really as being a very dynamic. We're moving into a very dynamic. I think this area is coming through, finish off the pandemic, really starting to see kind of that build and energy come back into it. So again, we're hoping we were too conservative. We're hoping that it goes up and this area brings more employment opportunities in. But that's where we have to start. We have to start historically and go to what we have now. So I mentioned the goals. These might be a little small. They are on the poster in the back. But these are the big 5 buckets we have for goals. Mobility and accessibility. Using a strategic approach to provide mobility and accessibility opportunities. What's that mean? That means if you are not able-bodied, if you cannot walk at the standard federal highway designated 7 miles per hour when you cross a crosswalk, how are we making sure you can cross a crosswalk safely? Can you cross it? Is there even a crosswalk on your street? Maybe that's our first. Maybe it's not accessible because you have a bus stop sign, but the bus stop's in the grass on the corner and there's nothing other than pavement and grass. And we have those bus stops. So we have a transit system, but is that transit system really accessible? That's what mobility. Again, how can you move? How easily can you move through the network and be able to take on daily life, what we call your daily life requirements? How easy is that? That's what we're looking at. Improving safety. Everything, and these are all up for, these are where we've got comments on these. Please leave notes with Doug or whoever. Improving safety and transportation for all modes. This is looking at, and I should have started with that, every mode of transportation. It's not just the car, it's not just the bicycle, it's everybody. When you exit your home in the morning, or whenever you exit your home, you become part of the transportation network. It's however you move through the community. So that's a big piece of it, is that to remind, it's everybody needs to be safe on the roadways. Everybody needs to be able to feel that they can get where they need to go without being an onerous task. Coordination of transportation with regional planning. I think we kind of just hit that a lot with the projections and forecasting, how it all links together, how we need the transportation network to support our growth and vice versa. Growth needs to work with where we have the network in the system. We have a great connectivity, 49 Expressway, 5S into Herkimer County, 840, 58 and 12. We connect already. So let's match up development with where those connections exist. Not needing more capacity, just needing the conversations to put the developments where they need to go. System preservation, that's the big one. Because it's great to think about all the future stuff and all the new stuff, but if we don't maintain what we have, we're going to have a bigger problem, because a lot of it, especially this area across the country, we are at 20-year lifespans, we're hitting our 30-year lifespans, we're aging out our infrastructure. And unfortunately, even the DOT's capital program will tell you they don't have enough to do maintenance on the state highway, which means our county, our town, our village, our cities are hurting just as much on trying to, do I replace a culvert? Do I fix the pothole? Where do I put my money? Because as in some places, if we detour and close a bridge, it might be a 20-minute detour for people. It's not always an easy solution. But so we need to think about that. How do we make the system more sustainable? If we're going to invest, let's make it smart. Let's build on what we have to build that sustainability. And then environmental impacts, and this is part of that preservation. Flooding has been an issue in this area, taking out bridges. Those bridges need to be rebuilt. Those bridges need to be rebuilt to meet the flooding standards for the water flows. But then we try to help see the bigger picture of, if that's an area where we know we have bicycles and pedestrians, can we build that bridge a little bit wider and be able to put the bicycle path, that pathway, that maybe 6 foot extra, at least even on one side, to build in new connections? And that's where the Transportation Council gets in the middle of these conversations of, you know, is there a way to think about this? Is there a way to marry our transportation monies with the environmental monies to get a better project? Green infrastructure is another thing that gets talked about. Talking about retention and rain gardens, so that if you're putting new pavement in, maybe you have that permeable strip in the middle so that your runoff's less, which then impacts the less stream impact. So there's ways that we can all kind of think together, and that's also the beauty of the Transportation Council being hosted in the planning department, because we have people on all these areas that are working together to see that bigger picture. So these are the goals we have sketched out right now. They are not set in stone, they are the draft ones. We're taking to the public right now to refine. You won't see, you know, we'll work through them. If there's changes, we will make them fit this plan going forward. And that's what the goals, so why are they important? The goal is this: we take that mobility and accessibility. We then talk about a strategy supporting it so that the region's tourist facilities, all the travelers, and where I talked about everybody should be able to travel easily through their community. It should not be more onerous for Doug than me just because he's tall and I'm short. That shouldn't happen in our transportation network. So we think about strategies. How do we get a strategy to get to that goal? And then that leads to the project list, which is the ultimate outcome. We develop a list of projects, and this one was non-motorized trail connections. So then, okay, if it's a non-motorized trail connection, that it's separated from the roadway, it's a safe place to walk, then both of us can walk equally because we both feel safe. Maybe if it's just leaving the shoulder of the road open, it's not, I don't feel safe, but Doug feels safe. So that's why the goals are important, because they drive the strategies, which ultimately get us to developing this project list. And that project list is back to where I said, when communities want to do things and we reference it, when we need to reference our own stuff to be able to get funding for those projects, this list is where they need to be. So we can then say, yeah, we thought about it, it's in our plan, this is why we're applying for this funding, that grant, etc. So, coming all the way to the end here, the next steps, again, finalizing those goals and strategies. That's where we're at. We're taking all this data, we're taking your input for the next about 60 days or so, and we determine where those needs are, where those actions are. If there's also big projects that if there's something really you want us to know about, again, make sure it gets noted down here. We have the survey as well online, that options there. We have the safety reporter option. There's multiple ways. We're trying to make it as simple as possible to talk to us and give us comments so we can take in that. And we do this public input, open house, the surveys out, like I said, about 60 days. And then late summer, we start really churning all of that through with our technical advisory committee. So we gear up for that draft coming out. Estimated end of September, early October is when the draft hits the street. And we'll probably be back in the public at that point in time. So I might have gone a little fast, but I also wanted to make sure Steve had time, because Steve's going to talk to you about safety. Any just immediate questions on the long-range plan? Okay, great. Either I talked too fast or you guys got this all down. You're all going to be doing this. So now Steve's going to...
I have a question.
Yeah.
Can you just go back to slide 7? The one that had the graph on it. I just want to look at that.
This one?
Yes. So I just couldn't see the years on that. Or
Oh.
just like it's not the same year?
Right, so 2023
Okay.
and 2045.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, current year to the projection now is 2045 is the end date of the plan.
Thank you.
Yep, no problem. Did you have a...
Well, I'm wondering about, you're talking about you got some money for additional EV chargers, probably level 2. But I'm wondering, because I looked at one of the slides back there, there's a tremendous jump from the number of EVs from, I think it was whatever the first number was,
Right.
to now. And I would anticipate, I think you would too, that there's going to be another jump as well, because you're projecting this out 20 years,
Right.
and the state says, you know, we're all going to be driving EVs. So how do you calculate the number of those 41 additional chargers? Is that going to be enough for the number of EVs in 2045, or how many more will you need?
We don't, so that's a little bit of a number that's almost not calculatable, because it does depend on how many EVs are personally bought. We also know that EVs, the number, there's partial hybrids and there's full EVs. And EV stations, these are publicly available, so there's also a few variables that people may be putting EV chargers in at their home as they become more popular. Businesses may be supporting it, so it might be that their employees can use it, but it's not publicly available. So we're trying to take strides to increase the number of truly public that are publicly accessible. As for how many, like I said, there's so many variables, I can't pinpoint exactly how many I would think we would need. We do know increase in level 3s will be the next ask, because these are level 2s, level 3s will be the next ask. So it's emerging, it's all emerging so much that we're trying to just keep up with what the trends are in the area. Yeah. Yes?
In addition to open houses like these and the survey, is there anything else included in the public outreach plan?
Yes. So we are doing what we call pop-up events. We're going to different, it's a go-to-them method. So if there's a farmer's market that we can join in, if it's something going on, maybe in some of the minority or limited English populations, we're trying to outreach through our community contacts agency partners to join in. And I should have mentioned that if anybody has an event they would like us to come to or visit or talk directly to, we are absolutely taking options on those. Some of the ones we did go to already, I believe, is like the Karen Baptist Church had a community day. We're working with the center down in downtown Utica, where Herkimer County Health has events. So yes, we're.
About that, have you talked to the Rome NAACP about their Juneteenth event?
I don't believe so. It's a good.
Okay.
I guess say Madeline and Josh behind you from my staff are taking those notes down right now. Thank you for that. We will follow up on it. Yes.
Consider doing focus groups with like a paid stipend or something to encourage.
So we are doing focus groups, and Steve can mention that, with the safety study, and we do bring up the long-range plan. So safety, you can see as part of this, safety also has its own funding study, but we're cross-pollinating because the topic really is one and the same. We aren't allowed to do any reimbursed because it's all federal dollars. So we can't go into that to reimburse people. We can offer refreshments. That's usually what we can bring in, food and refreshments. But yes, focus groups are, and with our Exit 31, focus groups are a large part and stakeholder, and with the safety program as well. And like I said, the safety group is also talking how that fits into the long-range plan because safety is at the core of the entire transportation network. So, yes. Anybody else before we switch over to Steve? Okay, Steve, yours. Just go up to view. Yeah, and then there's a full screen mode down at the bottom. Keep going. Yep. There you go.
You want to go through the first couple of slides? Because that's
Well,
how you get.
come hang out with me then.
All right.
I was gonna say, and first introduce yourself,
Oh.
because they don't know you. I do.
Hi, I'm Steve Wong. I lead our consultant team. I work for Parsons Transportation Group. I'm joined here by Doug Gerber from Weston and Sampson, and Sam Gordon is signing people in outside. He also has his staff sitting in the back here as well. We also have another colleague who has unfortunately had another engagement today, so could not make it, but he's from Cambridge Systematics. This is actually the public meeting. I'm going to change the cover slide.
We will get to hear it.
Yep, but really we're going to talk about just a quick overview of the project, a summary of some of the data that we've collected and some of the information we've gotten so far through not just looking at crash analysis, but also engaging the public, focus groups, survey results, and our safety reporter app. So we'll go through those pretty quickly, but then really what we want to do is hear from you, right? So we're looking for input, feedback, comments, thoughts on where improvements need to be made, where you would like to go but can't because no facilities exist, areas where you won't go because it just doesn't feel good, right? So we'll start from the beginning, but you know, a safety action plan is a data-driven process. It's not just empirical numbers, crash data, but it's also the lived experience of the people in the communities, right? So the data you provide us is included in that data-driven approach. So the feedback we get from you helps shape the plan and helps develop a process that we can start prioritizing some of those improvements as we get there.
You're ready to
Yep.
over you. We'll get you on. That's not good. Oh dear. It worked for mine. Oh.
That's always comes at the most inopportune time.
Well,
That's happened to me.
If we hit close, what happens? We apologize for this. I can talk through the safety action plan while you fix this?
Yeah.
Okay. So as Steve fixes this, I'll give you a little background of the safety action plan as I mentioned in the other piece. The safety action plan, as I had stated, is to deal and look directly and develop a strategic plan for the local road system. Why this matters is because we've never had a baseline analysis of safety on our local roadway network. Our local law enforcement knows where their issues are, but there's a lot of just anecdotal data, a lot of anecdotal conversations that happen in the community that we've never really cataloged. As we like to say, you know, if you live on a 2-lane road and you want to get the mail across on the other side of the road and it's posted 55, but you're pretty sure people are going past your house at 75, that's an issue. That impacts your daily life. But that, because sadly, in the world of safety statistics, a serious injury, accident, or fatality didn't occur there, it's not going to show up in our data. So that's the part of why we built this recorder, the Safe Street Recorder, is because we need to fill in the holes where the data doesn't talk to us. The data tells us a lot, and Federal Highways has a lot of very good prescriptive ways of looking at the data, drilling it down, but this, and the Transportation Council felt it was really imperative to understand our local roadway safety. In this area, our agricultural community, our slow-moving vehicles, our Amish horse and buggies. We know our local law enforcement are doing all they can. We know they are our neighbors, but we need to find a better way to coexist on the roadways because we create safety issues. Right now, there's safety issues out there, so we do need to be able to work on those issues. That Safe Streets for All action plan, the overall picture is we develop the safety action plan. That's a strategic driven plan. So those strategies developed are prescriptive by Federal Highways. They have kind of categories of what they want to see developed. Now what's in those categories, you can tweak and customize, and that's where you customize. But you ultimately will have generalized categories, and they will be for implementation. There's 3 E's that are in safety: engineering, education, and enforcement. Generally, they'll fall into one of those. So your stop DWI, your don't text and drive, that's an educational. Policing roadway in work zones, having state troopers right in the work zone, that's your enforcement. Or you see the speed trailers are great coming into communities. What they miss is they don't put the law enforcement right behind the speed trailer and hand out the ticket. So people are like, great, it's flashing at me, but I didn't get a ticket the last 5 times I drove past it. Why am I going to worry about it? So we could get funding to do that. And then engineering is maybe the curve in the roadway is just really a bad curve. Maybe it's something that hasn't, maybe there's trees that have grown over the edge so you can't see that intersection. You're pulling out, but you end up halfway in the lane because you can't see around the corner. So those are the 3 big buckets we'll end up in. Any of those things we could then get funding for to work with. And that's the big beauty of this plan, is any municipality or combination can go for funding. And that's really community driven to develop the projects that go into that safety action plan for what we can get to. So that's the general mechanics of how the safety action plan works. We're hoping to be through the plan have it drafted and finalized in January, by January, because the next round of funding for implementation comes out in basically March or April. So we're hoping to be ready to roll in to go get money to do some of these things. Yeah.
So sorry about that.
That's okay. I was gonna say, I filled in, I think, okay enough deeper, but Steve can
Yeah.
jump into
You know, the takeaways are that.
the
you know,
program overall.
Right, this is the joint Herkimer and Nida County initiative to get funding for this project. And really the idea is to develop a safety action plan. So there are two parts to federal funding. It's through the bipartisan infrastructure law, also known as the IIJA, which is the Infrastructure Improvement and Jobs Act. The safety action, so the program itself is called Safe Streets for All. It's Safe Streets for All. And as part of that, there's two buckets of funding that's available through grants. The first is to develop a safety action plan, and the second part is implementation of those projects that come out of that action plan, right? So in order to get access to the grant implementation funding, you have to have an approved safety action plan. So this is the first step in that process, right? We're setting up the framework so that as the grant funding becomes available, it's called Notice of Funding Opportunity through the federal government, NOFO. When that comes out, we're ready to go with, here's our safety action plan, then we can start pulling projects out of it to fill in that grant application. And the idea is to write this safety action plan so that for the counties, municipalities, for the MPO, they wanted to initiate something they can just kind of cut and paste. We have all the documents behind it, all the data behind it to document that it's a good project. So the implementation funding, it's competitive. So we need to create the strongest possible plan as possible. And there are requirements to the plan. Part of it is the data, but also there's robust public outlook. It's based on the safe system approach. And what the safe system approach, I guess I should go back, is this wheel on the lower left here. Has principles on the outside, and it has objectives on the inside, right? So for these, pretty self-explanatory. It's sort of a shift in thinking about safety, right? Humans make mistakes. We all know that, but no one ever said it before. Now we're saying, hey, people aren't perfect, things happen, they make mistakes. Humans are vulnerable, right? And so we're talking about vulnerable road users like bikes and peds and other people who don't have a hard metal shell around them, right? But most importantly, death and serious injuries are unacceptable. They're just not, right? And will we ever get there? Will we ever see zero deaths and fatalities on roadways? Who knows? But we got to try, right? So that's the important thing. This is saying we need to take steps to start reducing those fatal and serious injuries. And then redundancy. Now this is the harder one, and that's what the Swiss cheese model kind of demonstrates. If we apply those objectives, right, the 5 that were inside the circle, we're hoping that one of them is going to catch whatever is going to happen that creates that serious injury, right? So we're blocking it, as opposed to things have to be perfectly aligned for someone to have a fatal and serious injury if we're applying the safe system approach, right? Does that all make sense? So really, that's the redundancy of it all. We're trying to protect people by having multiple layers of protection built in. So that's the first thing that the safety action plan needs to have. But the second part is it needs to be data-driven, but also it's that meaningful public outreach and engagement. And that's what we're here for, right? This is part of it. Again, I mentioned it in the beginning. It's one thing to have hard crash numbers, but it's another to understand where those near misses are. Where do people not go because they don't feel safe? That's what we're trying to solve for. One of the principles of the SAFE system is being proactive. We're trying to address issues before they become a problem, before they become a hot spot on a map, right? So that's part of that. That's part of that. And also equity. Honestly, you know, that's part of that data-driven approach. We're looking at not just where the crashes are, but where are those underserved communities? And we're overlaying that on top. Not just that, but where are the communities where there's limited English proficiency? Environmental justice, Title VI type issues, right? Where are those and where are they you know, think of it as a Venn diagram. Where are those all happening at the same time? So those then kind of rise to be part of our priority areas. The one thing about the two counties is that they're pretty different, right? Different areas of the county are different. Right, you have very rural, farmland, agriculture, urban, kind of like this area, suburban. But we also know that there are groups within those counties that might not trigger those typical socioeconomic indicators, right? You know, they are not limited English proficient. They were born here. The only trigger they might have is they might be at or below the poverty level. How do you make sure those people, because they're having the same transportation issues as everybody else, how do we make sure we're reaching out to them? So part of our engagement focuses on looking at that, but also part of the way we analyze the data focuses on that as well. So just in terms of, this is the numbers part. So bear with me if you don't like it. It's a little boring, I think. And normally the guy who had another engagement, he does this part because I don't like it. We're looking at crash trends since 1979, which is when they started capturing that data. And you can see we're trending pretty well, but at the same time, there's all those plateaus, little upticks. So this is just kind of a high-level view of where we are. And again, this is more a tabular form by decade, a rolling 10-year, right? So per decade, where we are, again, kind of flattish. So that's just sort of an overall picture, right? But when you start digging a little deeper, this is how the Herkimer-Oneida County region relates to national performance measures. And so what you're looking at here are just that, right? You have the preliminary 2023 numbers because they haven't been certified by New York State DOT yet, so they're still considered preliminary. The second column is the rolling 5-year average, and then the column on the right kind of talks about where we were the previous 5 years versus the current 5 years. For me, the one thing that I pay attention to here is that the current year numbers, even though they're preliminary, are higher than the last 5-year average. So things are changing, right? And that's part of what we're trying to do is figure out why. Similar to like Dana's comment about housing, and population increases, decreases. Why is it doing that? What you're looking at here are the crashes, fatal and serious crashes that are happening in the two counties. We know that the thruway corridor is generally where a lot of the population is, but the thing to kind of point out is that it's not just happening in those urban areas, right? This is up in Old Forge, that's that kind of the call out there. And again, it's really all over. So it's not just on the highways, it's not just on the interstates. And I should go back and say, Dana mentioned that we're not really looking at state roadways because they're covered under the Strategic Highway Safety Plan. But we also understand that state roadways are the main roadways through a lot of the towns. So when that happens, we're looking at them. So this is part of that analysis, and it's looking at the level of service for safety. What does that mean? It means that those types of roadways that we're identifying here are the ones that are most likely the ones we can make the greatest improvements on. So it's looking at where the crashes are, we're looking at roadway characteristics, and where can we make the most improvements to improve safety. There are a number of tools we use to figure out what we can do. They're through FHWA, they're proven safety countermeasures, and those countermeasures, they're assigned through research, they're assigned a crash reduction value. So we know that if we add rumble strips in an area where there are a lot of head-on crashes, right, on a county roadway, for instance, it reduces crashes by, I don't remember the percentage, but something like 24%, I think it is, but I don't remember exactly. So we can make that improvement, and we project that we'll have a 24% reduction in fatal, or in crashes. There's also a separate fatal and serious injury crash. Sometimes when we look at improvements, we look at, well, I should say, well, we're looking to focus on reducing fatal and serious injury crashes, right? Sometimes we'll make an improvement that in the beginning may increase the number of crashes, but they won't be fatal and serious injury crashes. A prime example of that would be like a roundabout, a modern roundabout, right? So instead of a head-on crash or a T-bone crash where the closure rate is higher because the vehicles are traveling against each other, you're going to have crashes that are side swipes, generally at a lower speed because of the design of that roundabout. So sometimes, and generally the numbers for modern roundabouts, they'll normalize over time after people have seen it and gotten used to how to navigate through them. There's always a little uptick in the beginning. After about 6 months, it kind of calms down and does what it's supposed to do. So that's what this is representing. And right now, based on just a quick screening of where a lot of the crashes were occurring and the types of roadways, these are the places where we think right now, again, without overlaying any demographic data or socioeconomic data, this is sort of the beginnings of our network screening, or high crash network screening. These slides are supposed to fit it. So there's a bunch of data behind it, and we don't have as much time. So, but you can see, you know, for the most part, we're pretty level at this point. I'm just kind of, these were supposed to be hidden on the other version that's broken. But you can see, again, everything is kind of tracking pretty well. And we can make this available to you, and it will be up on the website sooner rather than later. So these are the major findings. As a summary, fatal and serious injuries, they're pretty steady, right? And the backup was the slides that I just kind of skipped through. There was a spike in non-motorized fatalities, especially during COVID, right? More people were out, more people were active. We were trying to be out in the fresh air. Greater chance for incidents to happen. Kind of makes sense. Also less cars on the road. So when something did happen, usually the results were not good. Jenna started mentioning the 3 E's of safety. There's, depending on who you ask, there's like 6 or 7 of them. And one of them, the newest one I've heard, is energy transfer. And that kind of goes back to having a roundabout, because the transfer of energy is less as opposed to this, right? So it's thinking about creating designs that separate the modes or people, vulnerable populations, and separating them in time and space from the other modes, right? So that's one of the other ways we kind of think about this stuff. So, you know, you can just kind of see these are some of the summary items. And I'm trying to go a little quicker. These are the types of crashes. Pretty self-explanatory. Green dots went down, red dots went up. But also just note that in some cases, you know, going up meant going up from, let's see, where's the, you know, going up, say, driver's age 20 and younger, and went up from 3 to 4 in 1 year, so went up. So statistically, you know, it's level, but nominally, there's an increase. Similarly, these are the strategic highway safety plan emphasis areas. And again, same kind of thing. Going up is red, bad. Going down is green, good. But again, Similar to what I mentioned earlier, road work is going up, but it was just, they had 0 and now they have 1. So you need to kind of take a look at that. But when you start looking at things like where's the pet crashes, the bike pet crashes, right? So they're starting to, they went up, and they went up quite a bit. Where they started going up, again, 4 to 7, still on the way up. Things that stand out here are the roadway departure crashes and also age-related crashes. So that helps us think about some of the opportunities to make those improvements in the safety action plan. And as Dana also mentioned, there's 2 types of improvements. There's infrastructure related, right, the engineering part, but there's also the non-infrastructure related, like additional driver training or rules of the road education, free bicycle helmet giveaways to kids program, those kinds of things. So there are other ways to help kind of solve some of these issues that aren't necessarily tearing up a roadway. A lot of it is about driver education, and actually all people using the roadway education. This was also supposed to be hidden, but what you're looking at here are the different types of crashes and how they're broken down. We also know that there's overlap between them, so when you actually look at the data, it doesn't equal 100%. It's going to be above it because some are overlapped, which is why I don't want to show it. This is an example of the network screening, which isn't supposed to be here, but here. Now we're getting into public engagement. And this kind of addresses some of those questions that you had about, did you do focus groups? Yeah. We have our crowdsourcing map that we call the Safe Streets Reporter, the community survey that we have, tabling opportunities Dana mentioned, those are the pop-up events. We developed a project brand, but more importantly, we're coordinating with the other studies, right? So similar to here, we're also repping the long-range transportation plan, and we're trying to do it all together because they are really all interrelated. So just quickly about the Safe Street Reporter, our colleagues in the back are ready and willing and able to help you add new points. So as you're thinking about, boy, this intersection's really bad, we can go and add that. But as of March 9th, we had almost 200 data inputs. And you can kind of see where they are, right? And I think that makes sense. We also talked about creating new bikeways and trails. So these are connections that people drew. So we want to get here to here. It's to get to shopping or to get to other trails, right? They're thinking about ways to get around without having to use their car. Just some of the demographics, again, of the people who responded to the survey. On the right side of the screen is from the Hoptic Transportation Atlas, right? Just so we have a kind of a baseline of where we are and who we're reaching out to. We're kind of close. We're doing probably a little better with some of the minority groups that responded. So I think the outreach is pretty good. It's getting there, right? We always want to do better.
We've translated just a note where we think we haven't pulled the responses in a little bit just to give us some time, but we've translated the survey into the 3 major languages that are spoken in the area and worked with the center on that so that they can take the hard copy surveys and work with it. And there's also, our website has the Google Translate feature on it, so we're also having some program documentation translated into those top 3, which right now is Spanish, Bosnian, and Karen are the top 3 for the area. There's more, but those are the top. So just, we're hoping our numbers trend up a little bit with additional, and that's where if there's more opportunities, we absolutely are more than willing to talking to people.
Again, the majority of the respondents were from Oneida County and mainly from the city of Utica. that kind of tells me we need to do better outreach at the other places, right? And our outreach strategy is evolving. As we're seeing the results come in, we're thinking about different ways to get to people. The one thing I wanted to point out, and I went back to the Safe Streets reporter, but look at where those data points are, and then look at where the crash days are, right? Overlaps pretty well. And, you know, as someone who likes to look at this kind of stuff, you know, that's exciting to me because it actually makes sense. But from the survey results, right? So we talked about we only have about 7 people who ride transit. So we're trying to do a little better job. We started working with Centro to post the QR code for the survey on the buses. So as people are sitting there, maybe they're going to scan it and do the survey right there while they're riding the bus. You know, some of the other things to point out that I think are important is that, you know, almost 70% of the people say they would take transit if it met these criteria. Not surprisingly, the majority of people drive their cars. And again, this all dovetails well with the long-range transportation plan. So we understand how people are moving around the 2 counties. A lot of people like bike lanes, 71%. So again, I think those are some of the things to take a look at and to kind of see from here. So other concerns we also had some open-ended questions. There were safety concerns and traffic issues. A lot of it was confusion with signage and striping that was faded, missing, you know, just general wayfinding. Some of the intersections, again, as you're coming into the smaller towns and villages, they kind of come in at skews and funny angles, sometimes a little difficult if you're not used to it, not really used to what you're seeing. Vulnerable populations, again, the people without a hard metal shell around them. Right? So it's bikes, peds, horse and buggy. Right? That came up a lot, as you know, people feel that horse and buggies are at risk on the roadways. Again, need for rules of the road training, where the people should ride bikes, or where the buggies should be. Other vulnerable populations, farm equipment. Certainly in the agricultural areas, they need to move their big tractors and things from farm to farm. Creates a problem when people are trying to get to work in a hurry, right, on public roadways. Limited transportation options, right? You know, lack of transit. You know, we talked about that a little bit, right? And environmental conditions, we mentioned it before as well. Bus stops in the wintertime, they're not shoveled, or sidewalks are not shoveled, so people are forced to walk in the street where it's a little bit more clear. Those are those safety concerns that people have been mentioning in the surveys. So this is the other planned outreach event, right? We're here at the May 22nd meeting. We are, again, trying to reach out to some of those other populations that we know are generally hard to get to, like the Amish communities and the Oneida Nation. So we're working to do that, set those meetings up, and we'll have one-on-one type conversations with them as well. And this is where we are. It's kind of you know, here's where we are and our next steps. We're now at that public meeting number 1, where we've done the data analysis and some of the network screening. The next steps is after we close out the comment period, which will be about a month from today, is to start thinking about a range of alternatives. What can we do to resolve some of these issues that are going on in the 2 counties? And the next outreach event we're planning is a safety symposium, where we're going to have those different options available for people to come and see and tell us, oh, that's not going to work in our neighborhood because, or that's a great idea, we need more of that, right? So we're trying to get feedback from the communities about what they want to see as we're starting to develop alternatives. So then we go back and kind of, we finalize what those alternatives are, and in those specific locations. Sometimes they're gonna be a very specific intersection, but sometimes they're gonna be a systemic improvement. And what I mean by that is, on a typical two-lane roadway with head-on crashes that we talked about before, adding a centerline rumble strip. So let's do that on all of those types of roadways. All of them that have the same speed, same roadway characteristics, same volumes, same kind of thing, right? So that as a project, the county or the MPO can initiate that project or apply for grant funding to implement that improvement systemically, right? Again, the idea is here to be proactive. We want to make these adjustments before there's a problem. Then we come back to you, the public, and we talk about, okay, here's what we think, and here's what we think are good alternatives for this problem. And then we get your feedback again, and then we finalize the plan. The plan needs to get legislative approval to give it teeth in time for that next notice of funding opportunities, where we can then pull out those projects that we want to advance or apply for grant funding. I think that is it. Yes. So, if you haven't filled out the survey, we have laptops here. We can fill it out. If you want to add in points on the Safe Streets Reporter, we have people to help you do that. Or you can do it at home, right? I think we have handouts. There's a QR code that'll take you to all of it. And you can, as you're after dinner and you feel like, I just want to do something fun.
And use the safety reporter is at least tablet size, iPad size, or computer screen.
Phone less so.
Phone is probably going to be a little tricky to get to that level of detail. The survey absolutely is SurveyMonkey formulated for the phone, no problem. But yeah, the reporter, we do know it is more large screen based. So any questions for Steve or on the safety plan or on anything? We're open discussion, we're here.
I have one. So obviously we're in upstate New York. Weather plays a big impact on our traffic.
Yep.
Do you normalize any of your data given when the crash is taking place throughout the year?
We look at the environmental conditions of the roadways, right? So that's part of it. You look at the contributing causes, which includes environmental conditions like weather. Even if it's clear out, the road still may be icy or wet. You also look at things like time of day. I worked on one project where there were a lot of rear-end crashes because they're heading directly east into the sun, right? So as you can see those crash clusters happening, not in space, but in time, right? Certain times of the year, the sun's right there as they're going to work, and that's why those crashes were likely occurring. And there are fixes for that. So once you identify what the fixes or what the contributing causes are, you can find solutions to help mitigate it.
Thank you.
Yeah.
I think this is correct. Correct me if I'm wrong. The slides go by kind of quick, but I think you determined that there was an increase in pedestrian serious or fatalities, right?
Yeah.
Okay, well, have you accounted for in your data the type of vehicle? Because you're probably aware that studies indicate that Americans are buying huge SUVs and trucks, and that has led to the increase in fatalities because the height of the vehicle is not optimum for a pedestrian.
So, yes and no. And the reason I say that is because when you look at pedestrian crashes, you assume all of them are serious or fatal injury crashes. So you account for all of them, and regardless of vehicle. So we don't specifically look at vehicle type. We just know that bikes and peds, because they don't have a hard candy shell around them, are very, very vulnerable. One of the slides that didn't show up has a graphic which shows at certain speeds, the chances of surviving a motor vehicle crash as a pedestrian significantly drop as the speeds go up.
Well, I would suggest to you that maybe you'd want to go in there because in the accident reports, they would have the license. You could easily identify what type of vehicle it is.
Yep.
That might give you added information.
We generally, when we're doing the large screening like that, we don't get the police reports because that's a time-intensive process, not for us, but for the law enforcement departments. They physically have to go and pull out the copies, pull out the police report, scan it, refile it, and like eventually send it to us. We are looking at specific locations, hotspot locations, and we will be doing that for those, but it would be very difficult to do for all the crashes that happen in the two-county region. So we're focused.
I'm just talking about the serious and the fatalities.
No, I am too.
Okay.
I am too.
Well, how many were there? There were only...
Fatal and serious crashes?
Yeah.
It was not.
No, I'm talking about pedestrian. Vehicle pedestrian serious accidents.
I'll have to go back and take a look, but
There was less than 100, right?
I don't recall offhand,
Okay.
but maybe, yeah. I mean,
Yeah.
so yeah, I mean that's certainly something we can do. Also, not just because it's a big pickup truck doesn't mean it's heavy. EVs have heavy batteries in them too.
Well, the studies I've seen have more. That's important, the weight of the vehicle, but it's also the height of the vehicle.
So that E, I was talking, the 6th or 7th E, the energy transfer one, weight, time, acceleration, physics, right?
Right.
It's harder, just because it weighs more. I understand your point, and yes, that is something that has come up and does come up in a lot of research. The frontal size of the vehicles. But generally, we're focused on that energy transfer.
Okay.
Any other questions? Well, thank you for coming. Feel free to take a look at the boards. I know everyone, you were engaged in conversations before, which is why we started a little later. We're like, everyone's talking. We don't want to stop that. So, thanks for coming, and let us know if you have any questions.
Thank you. And